Hey guys, it's Jane. Well, this is it. This is the end. I finished Infinite Jest. I should do a really little happy dance, but the reality is I'm far too tired. I was away for the weekend, and going away with a baby is never good. It's never good. It's never good. So there's that. As I said, I was away for the weekend. I finished the book right at the beginning of the weekend, and then I was out of sort of internet range for most of the weekend. And when I got home, there were just a few things that were still bugging me about the book. And so I went on a little, web trawl. This is where the spoiler stuff starts, so feel free to drop off now if you don't want to hear anything about the end or whatever. The particular question that I came to my sort of web trawl about is what's going on in the ending. There's a very unresolved ending, and I knew that because I've read it before. But first time I read it, even though it was unstated, I thought that what I was reading was Don Gately in hospital but about to recover. I felt quite positive about that, whereas reading it this time, it felt much more like I was reading Don Gately dying. So basically, I just wanted to do a kind of quick poll and see what other people thought. Did they think that he died, or did they think that he recovered? And it just took me right down a major rabbit hole, and apart from the fact life intervened, I could well and truly still be there, because there literally books have been written about this, and there's any number of people arguing about this sort of stuff on the internet. But what surprised me most is that the big question that I came to it was just like a absolute secondary issue for a lot of people. There were so many other questions that on reading the stuff that I was reading on the internet, I realized hadn't even really resolved themselves as questions to me. So things like, who was sending out the videotapes, the interlace cartridges? Given that the creator is dead, who is sending these things? None of the governmental or terrorist organisations that we read about seem to have it, so who is the person that's doing it? And there's all sorts of theories about that. Then there are questions about, of course, what happened to Hal. The beginning of the book, it turns out, if you read the chronology carefully, the first chapter is actually set a year after the end of the whole rest of the book. So most of the book takes place in the year of the Depend Adult Undergarment, and the first chapter happens at the end of the year of Glad, and there's like 12 months in between the end of the book and the beginning of the book. So there's this empty 12 months that we don't hear about, and obviously some major stuff has gone down. What has happened to Hal in the intervening time? And again, there's all sorts of fan theories about this. So yeah, I've got to say that having now finished Infinite Jest for the second time, for the first time I started reading some of the kind of secondary literature, and now I feel like I need to read it all over again. Because there's all these questions that I just sort of, I think maybe it's because I read science fiction fantasy quite a lot, where there's just stuff going on in the backstory of the world building that you never really understand, that you don't even really attempt to understand, or at least I as a reader. It's just part of the weather almost of the story. Whereas so many people with this have been trying to put all the pieces together. And one thing that I did learn, which is something that I forgot by the time I got to the end of the book from reading one of these pages, is that pretty much we're assured that Don Gately is alive at the end of the book, because in the beginning chapter there's actually a reference to him doing something with Hal in the intervening year. So yay, my impressions first time around, my happy impressions of the ending, it turns out is probably true, because of course, unreliable narrators and whatever, and how much of anything can you give credit to. One of the more interesting theories that I read is about Oren, Hal's brother, being the person who's actually behind the cartridge dissemination. And that really blew my mind. But it actually pulls a lot of other things together. But as I said, there's obviously, people have spent years and years of their life pulling out threads and clues and things and trying to get all the different parts to fit together of the story. Whereas I was reading it in the moment, in a way, like following characters' stories rather than trying to get everything to fit together. So yeah, maybe I need to do it again. I don't know. Another theory that I read talks about the fact that the structure of the book is very specific, and this guy talks about it as a parabola. So that the beginning and the end mirror each other, and there are other mirror passages along that we have this sort of parabolic shape to the narrative. And while I haven't gone back and checked in detail the kind of, the assertions that it was making, it actually, that sort of idea makes a lot of sense to me. Hebrew poetry is often structured like this, and I've studied some Hebrew poetry, and it has a chiastic structure, which means that the beginning and the end match each other, and you have matching things. And in Hebrew poetry, at any rate, what that means is the center actually tells you what the whole thing is about. And I don't know whether that's necessarily true with this, this author picks out what he figures is the centerpiece and what that's saying about the story. But yeah, so as I said, huge rabbit holes to go down. But obviously there was very careful structure in the book. I understood and received that. And the fact that the beginning and the end echo each other is actually a really interesting idea, because the beginning is Hal, with lots and lots of thoughts going on in his head and being unable to express them for reasons. And the end is John Gately in a hospital bed with all this stuff that's going up here, but he can't express anything because he's got a tube down his throat, and so he can't communicate. And our two main characters being in a thematically similar situation at the beginning and the end, points up that as being one of the main sort of themes of the book. The distance between understanding or feeling something and being able to effectively communicate it, and that the two things we often can think of them as being one and the same, but there's actually a distance between those two things. This is probably not unconnected with all the stuff that's going on in the eschaton, a passage where, if you've read the book, you remember the big argument that starts Pemulus losing it, which kind of heightens the whole comedy of the whole thing, is about the map versus the territory. So it starts snowing, and somebody claims, well, that means that it's snowing in the game, and that's going to affect the outcomes of the calculations. But Pemulus says, no, it's snowing on the map, and snowing on the map is not the same as snowing on the territory, that there's a difference between the map, the representation, and the territory, the thing represented. And this, again, there's this distance between the representation and the thing represented. Beyond all of these fan theories that I read and things that I've thought in response to things I've read, the one other set of questions that I've had on completing the book is actually about gender. I first read this book 5 or more years ago, and I don't remember at the time noticing quite as starkly how strongly gendered it is as a text. This time around, the absence of women characters, and when they're present, the particular ways that they're being represented, was very stark to me. At the tennis academy, there are as many girls as boys, but we almost never hear about the girls. And when they are referred to, it's almost always generic, dismissive. The only name female character who's a player is Anne Kittenplan, and Anne Kittenplan is butch and not seen as being such a great person. The only member of the family, the Incandenza family, who is female is Avril, and she is of all of the members of the Incandenza family, she's the one that we get the least insight to. We have narrative voice from the perspective, I think, of every other character in the family, but never from Avril's point of view. She's just this kind of black box question mark. The plot is impelled by actions that she takes, but you never get a feeling about what's actually going on for her. That sort of distinction comes up in a conversation, not about Avril, but about women in general, between Hal and Oren. Oren speaks about his womenfolk, who he goes through like Kleenex, as the subject. You know, the current woman is the subject. And Hal says it's ironic because in actual fact, they're anything but. They're the opposite. And I can't remember the exact use of words, but what he's saying is that Oren is treating them as objects rather than subjects. So there's this absence. Women are represented in the book, I think, as being kind of unknowable, and that really raises a lot of questions for me. I did enjoy the book. I think I'm finishing it now with as many questions as I started with. And maybe, who knows, in another 5 years I might read it again. I have made it through to the end. I hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.